Welcome to EoZTV. I'm Elder of Zion, and today we're going to be talking about how, if not now, if not now lies. I guess that could be a tongue twister if you do it certain ways. But today, if not now, the organization that's very similar to Jewish Voice for Peace, the one that's essentially anti-Zionist, but tries to get a lot of very uninformed college students to join them and to join them in anti-Israel activities, they decided to put together a Twitter thread. It may have been an answer to my video from a couple of days ago in which I described how Hamas had messed up the medical infrastructure, and not just Hamas and the Palestinian Authority had messed up the medical infrastructure in Gaza. So it may have been a response to that because I consistently called them a liar for pretty much all week. Nevertheless, whether it was a response to me or not, they decided to put together a thread saying how Israel is supposedly responsible to of all the bad things that are happening in Gaza. So I responded in line, within like 15 minutes for everything they wrote, but I decided that a video is probably a better way to respond. So again, for my listeners, if you want, you can ask questions in the chat window. If more viewers come along, that would be great. It's going to be put up on YouTube afterwards anyway. So here we go. So here was the main point of the If Not Now thread, saying that as COVID-19 starts to spread through Gaza, we wanted to share info on how Israel's blockade of Gaza has always been a public health crisis, how it's making things so much worse. A few trucks of medical supplies won't change that. Israel must lift the blockade. They're using coronavirus as an excuse for what they've always wanted, which is that Israel should stop defending itself from Gaza rockets and terror. The few trucks of medical supplies was an interesting thing because they're lying already in there. This is what Israel allowed into Gaza just last week. 2,547 truckloads of goods, of which 206 tons of medical supplies just last week. So that's more than a few truckloads. They're trying to minimize it and make it sound like there's not. No, the Kerem Shalom infrastructure is gigantic. I've been there. I was given a tour. It is absolutely huge. It can do more, as a matter of fact, if people pay for more stuff. All they do, that it's generally goods that get traded and they get sent to Gaza, whether it's from NGOs or whether it's that people are purchasing for Gaza or the Gazans are purchasing for themselves. Israel lets essentially everything through unless it's a product that could be used for terror. And Israel has loosened up those rules a lot over the years as well. So yeah, they're exaggerating and lying already in that very first tweet. The second thing that they said was that Israel's blockade has prevented adequate access to medical supplies, forcing many doctors in Gaza to use outdated equipment because they don't have any other option. And they're pointing to an article from Haaretz saying that the World Health Organization said the Israel-led blockade limits medical supplies to Gaza. The funny thing is, if you actually click on it, the date was 2009. Yes, the most current problems that they could find with Gaza, with supposedly limiting medical supplies, was 11 years ago. Even then, Israel disputed it. Israel said there are no restrictions on medical equipment. And again, I spoke to the people in Kerem Shalom about this. So who wasn't lying? I'm not going to say that the World Health Organization was lying. What happened was there were Israel, and certainly throughout this past decade, as I said, the things have tightened and they've loosened, but they've mostly loosened over the past decade. But practically all medical supplies go right through without anybody even asking. In fact, practically all supplies go through. The questions of certain types of spices that Israel used to limit, that was for a couple of years. That has not happened for a very long time. So practically everything goes through unless it can be considered what's called a dual-use item, which could possibly be used to make terror weapons. So when I spoke to them about it, they said occasionally there'll be a piece of medical equipment, for example, that uses radiation. So in something like that, they have to take an extra few days to look at it, make sure that it's okay, and then they let it through anyway, which means that they let everything through. This is, so again, the first thing that they're saying is a complete and utter lie. Let's look at their next tweet. 97% of Gaza's water is contaminated, leading to preventable illnesses and deaths. due to Israel preventing the needed water treatment equipment from entering Gaza. It doesn't take too much to find out that there is water equipment going through. Now, the 97% is probably true. 97%, it seems to be. The water situation in Gaza is horrible. That's not, nobody's questioning that. But Israel has no interest in making Gazans all poisoned by their own water and their own sewage. Over here, sewage treatment services. This is from 2018, and it describes a construction of a North Gaza wastewater treatment plant. And all of the equipment in that plant obviously went through Israel in order to get there. So the idea that Israel is blocking any equipment for wastewater treatment is an absolute and complete lie. And beyond that, in The Guardian, at the very end of last year, they said next year is supposed to see the construction of 3 badly needed internationally funded wastewater plants for another 100,000 cubic meters of sewage. So all of this stuff is coordinated with Israel. All of this stuff is happening now. Israel does not block anything. IfNotNow is lying. And they're trying to demonize Israel to make them sound like Israel wants to make Gazans go, starve and thirst to death. Absolute lie, absolute libel, absolute slander. It's clearly not true, and you can see it even in The Guardian. The next lie is Israel's blockade, through hampering economic demand and limiting electricity in Gaza, has shrunk Gaza's waste management abilities, which has led to trash contaminating the soil. This is interesting, because here's what they claim. I mean, here I'm going to show you here exactly what they're linking to from Al Jazeera. Okay? Here's Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera also has a headline saying Israeli blockade hinders Gaza waste management. But if you listen to the report, and we're talking about, and the first part of the report was talking about Gazans that are going through dumps and grabbing plastic out of it in order to be able to help recycle it. So, the sort of people that scavenge the plastic get paid however much, a little bit, and then it goes for these plastic treatment plants in order to be able to make them into useful products again. So it's recycling. But listen to what this person says. He's like the head of one of the recycling plants.
The government needs to tell people how to dispose of plastic properly, and at the same time send plastic to factories like ours in big amounts. It's much better than throwing it in the garbage.
Given Gaza's other challenges, widespread poverty, repeated conflict between its armed groups and Israel, it's unsurprising that recycling hasn't been a priority. But that means more than 90% of the plastic discarded, more than 300 tons a day, is simply dumped.
And this is what that looks like on the ground, or more to the point, in the ground. And that's why Gaza's plastics problem is also a chemical contamination problem.
Some 2/3 of the waste here is organic. As it rots away, it takes with it toxic material from plastic and other waste it's mixed in with. That further degrades Gaza's already tainted soil and water and threatens its food chain.
Okay, so listen to what they're saying. They're saying that, Hamas obviously can't prioritize, recycling programs. Although the person in the beginning saying, it's very simple. All Hamas has to do is to tell people, just like throughout the rest of the world, everybody does this, to tell people, separate the plastics before you throw them out. It isn't rocket science to do that sort of thing. Hamas can make the announcement literally tomorrow and then start enforcing it, through their garbage. It would not be that hard. Of course, it's going to cost a little bit of extra money to be able to do that. But look what happens. This is what happens. The plastic degrades, and it hurts Gaza's water table, and it hurts the whole water supply. This is not because of Israel. This is because Hamas doesn't prioritize. And they say, because of all the other problems, they can't prioritize. Of course they could prioritize it. If it means that it's poisoning their own water of their own people, of course they could prioritize it. Tell people, hey, separate them. That's it. That's what everybody else does. It isn't rocket science, but they're blaming Israel for Hamas not doing the most basic part of what you would expect a government to do. Once again, IfNotNow is lying. Next lie. Israel's throttling of Gaza's electricity, as well as its bombing of Gaza's power plants, has led to the closing of sewage treatment plants and sewage being pumped into the sea, contaminating fish and water. Well, they definitely pump sewage into the sea. As far as the closing of the sewage treatment plants, they're having problems with electricity in Gaza. Guess who has caused much or most of the problems of electricity in Gaza? It all happened around the most recent ones were about the year 2017, 2018. The Palestinian Authority decided that they wanted to shut down the electricity in Gaza altogether, and they stopped paying Israel for it because they are the ones that pay Israel to provide electricity to Gaza. Israel was reluctant. Israel was trying to not do it. They did not want to cause this humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And the Palestinian Authority insisted, they're the official government, and they're insisting, hey, we want to hurt our own people in Gaza. So finally Israel relented. It was not at all happy about it. You could look up the articles about it at the time. But also, talk about this bombing of the Gaza power plants. They're talking about, and this was something that they said, happened in the 2014 war. And over here you can see, like the Guardian reported on July 29th, the power plant is finished. It's gone. Israel bombed it. And then, by a miracle, by September, Gaza's only power plant is ready to begin running again as soon as shipment of fuel arrives. This was September. The power plant was not destroyed. The only thing that was destroyed was one of the fuel tanks. There were a couple of things here and there that happened around there, but it was, as far as the bombing was concerned. But the power plant itself was essentially intact. And so it was really just one of the tanks. And as a result, for a while, Gaza had to bring in fuel. They weren't able to stockpile fuel the way they wanted to. However, something else happened that most people did not know about. Because Israel, of course, after every single incident that happens during a war, they open investigations. And they did an investigation to try to figure out what happened because the power plant was definitely on Israel's list of not to hit it. Because Israel has a list of lots of places that they're not supposed to bomb. And they set that up before a war. And they said, here, this is what happened. They were trying to figure out exactly if a bomb, they said it may have been some shrapnel. Literally, the IDF cannot figure out, they certainly did not do it deliberately, and they cannot even figure out how they did it accidentally, though they're figuring something must have happened. However, if you read the report, they say terror organizations located a large number of terror assets adjacent to the power plant, sometimes mere tens of meters away, including launching pits, medium-range rocket launchers, openings of combat tunnels, weapons caches, and more. So they surrounded the power plant with targets. And they were using the power plant as a shield. Now, again, Israel was trying as hard as it could to hit these things and not the power plant. Apparently, something went wrong at one point, but it was not nearly the damage that was said. And the power plant's been up and running since literally 2 months after the war. So that has nothing to do at all with any problem with sewage treatment. The next IfNotNow lie says that the UN fact-finding missions from the 2008-9 Israeli assault on Gaza found that Israel intentionally targeted civilian infrastructure, and then they said that Israeli warplanes bombarded a Gaza wastewater treatment facility. This is, of course, the Goldstone report from late 2009 that said that Israel intentionally targeted civilian infrastructure. Guess what Goldstone said afterwards? After he finally had a chance to listen to what Israel was said, which he should have done during the report, and he didn't. He essentially did not listen to anything Israel said. He recanted it. He said, if I would have known then what I would have known now, the report would be very different than what it is. He admitted that he made a mistake. He no longer believes that Israel intentionally killed civilians in Gaza or targeted civilians in Gaza, which of course they didn't, and they don't, and they never do. If Israel wanted to intentionally kill civilians, there wouldn't be any civilians left. Israel has a very powerful army. Israel spends a lot of its time and money and effort to avoid killing civilians, and it doesn't take much logic or research to be able to find that out. But what about the targeting? They said that the Goldstone report said that they targeted the sewage treatment plant. So once again, Israel has their investigations that they do after every war. And this is called the Namar Wells, is what they said it was, in the Jabalia refugee camp. So first the IDF was like saying, what are you even talking about? We're not aware of any wells. Give us coordinates. So finally they went to Hamas, essentially. They went to the Gaza Coastal Municipality's water utility and said, can you please tell us what the exact coordinates of this well that you said that we hit was? They gave them the coordinates, and Israel goes, oh, look at that. It's inside a Hamas compound. This entire place over here is a Hamas compound, a closed thing. Here's the gate. Here is where that well is. Israel says we did not know about the well. If Gaza would have provided the information ahead of time, or if any of the NGOs would have provided the information ahead of time, they would have avoided it anyway. But this was a Hamas target. And this is, and Israel, yes, absolutely. In the first day of the war, they did attack it because it was a Hamas target. And Hamas was literally hiding, or not hiding, they were using this as a shield of sorts. They essentially are putting these wells inside their own compound. These are, again, things that IfNotNow is never going to tell you. Finally, what IfNotNow says is what's clear from all this is Israel's 15-year blockade has led to Gaza having a broken medical infrastructure, contaminated water supply, contaminated food supply. Gaza does have a broken medical infrastructure. Want to know one other reason why that is? Let's go back to that Guardian article. It said that, it also mentions, by the way, that Israel's electricity supply has risen to an average of 12 hours from as little as 4 hours a day, because Israel managed to work with Qatar, of all places, to be able to help that. Israel is now allowing about 3,000 Gazans to work in Israel, which is something they're doing fairly quietly. But again, to help the economy, Israel is doing this stuff. And this new field hospital, which we've talked about, that the Palestinian Authority is dead set against, is also supposed to be open. But over here, look at this. It said, I made a mistake. I thought it said it over here. But however, in 2007, when Hamas took over, a lot of the doctors in Gaza left. They quit, and they left it because of Hamas. That's the reason that the medical infrastructure is going down the drain, or has gone down the drain. It's because as soon as Hamas took over, and then the Hamas took over, it used to be that the Palestinian Authority were the ones that were paying all these guys, and Hamas said, no, we're going to start the ones that we're going to tell you what to do, all the doctors and all the dentists and everybody else that was in Gaza, and a lot of them just quit. It's because of Hamas that and that was the beginning of the bad news for Gaza's medical infrastructure falling apart. The doctors said, I don't want to work for Hamas. They're intelligent, well-studied people, and they know what Hamas is about, and they had no desire to work for these guys. And the same sort of thing happens. That starts falling apart. Everything else starts falling apart if the doctors leave. Everybody says, there's no doctors. There's a shortage. Why is there a shortage of doctors in Gaza? The reason is because of Hamas. All of this stuff is because of Hamas. The whole reason that there's any sort of a closure on Gaza is because of Hamas importing all these weapons. And the proof of the pudding is Israel has no love lost between itself and the Palestinian Authority. There's a lot of big problems with the Palestinian Authority. However, Israel allows all this stuff to go to the Palestinian Authority. Israel's not trying to block goods from going there because they work with them. They cooperate with them. And sometimes when Hamas wants to, they cooperate better with Israel, and then Israel eases up restrictions. That's the way it is. Hamas hasn't been sending rockets over lately, and Israel has been increasing the amount of fishing area and has been, and doing other stuff in order to help out the people in Gaza. Like I mentioned before, like giving people work, which again is not happening now during the coronavirus thing, but thousands of Gazans are now going literally every day for jobs in Israel. They get paid probably quadruple what this normal salary is in Gaza. So even a few thousand people that are going, and it's more than 3,000 now, I think it's about 5,000, even those people that are going every day to work will have a very large outsize effect onto the Gaza economy, positive effect, because it's not just 5,000 out of the people in Gaza working, it's as if 20,000 are more employed because of the extra money that's coming in. All of these are things that IfNotNow doesn't want you to know. Israel clearly has no interest in Gaza going down the drain. It doesn't have any interest, certainly as far as the coronavirus is concerned, to have anything bad happen to Gaza, because that's going to affect everything in Israel if that happens. And nobody wants that to happen. Israel and Gaza authorities, the NGOs, everybody have been working together, very much so, in order to have everything work. In fact, there was a UN report, and I should have brought it up here, but there was a UN report, talking about their first coronavirus report on Gaza, in which there was not a single word from the UN. I mean, they'll say bad things about Israel, and they don't like Israel at all. But there was not a single word that said Israel was blocking any UN efforts, and the UN's working with NGOs and with Gaza groups and everything like that in order to help shore up the medical as much as possible before any sort of outbreak that happens in Gaza. Not a single word saying that Israel was preventing anything from happening. in the, that the UN should do anything, that the UN wouldn't be able to do anything. It is not because of Israel. It's because Hamas has set up and prioritized rockets and terror tunnels and balloons with bombs on them and incendiary devices. That's what it does. I'm just going to throw this last part in only because it came out today and it was interesting. This is not Hamas. Joe Truzman, who's fantastic, you should all be following him. He just has a little video over here showing that there was a prisoner that was released from Israel today from Fatah, from the group that's headed by Mahmoud Abbas and of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. And even though there has been, Gaza only had 2 people that are in quarantine right now, but there have been about 58 people that have gotten coronavirus in the West Bank, so it's out there. But even so, here's a big crowd of people that are celebrating. Listen. So not only are they shoulder to shoulder in the middle of this virus outbreak, they're shooting guns in the air, and bullets tend to go down after they go up. What I thought was very funny was this guy over here in the front. He has a glove, which you would think, well, that's good, but he only has one glove. And he's happily shaking, clapping his hand with the other. So I don't think the glove is helping him too much stay healthy. So again, this is if the Palestinians themselves, and talking about the people, whether it's the leaders, if they themselves don't care about their own lives, it's like, it's hard to blame Israel for the stuff that's going on over here. Israel's doing everything it can in order to stop, anything bad from happening to the Palestinians. It does not help Israel at all to have these things, to have Palestinians without water or without, without sewage treatment or anything like that. It is very counterproductive for Israel's interest. Israel has every desire to keep both, the Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, happy. And it's the dysfunctional split between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, as well as a very dysfunctional mindset that the Palestinians have as far as this sort of thing is concerned, in which terrorism is really honored and deified, and terrorists are honored, and this is the problem. It's the fundamental problem, and it's the groups like IfNotNow try to do everything they can to distract from the basic issue that the Palestinians really love terror, and they don't really seem to really want to have a state unless that state is destroying Israel. This is pretty much it. These are what the facts are. These are the facts that IfNotNow does not want you to have, and in the end, it's just that IfNotNow consistently, daily, in their tweets, in their talks, anything like that, nothing but lies. There was essentially nothing that was true that they said true in this whole thread, except for a couple of the slight, peripheral things like, 97% of the water in Gaza is undrinkable, which is true. And a lot of it is Hamas's fault. And this is just the way it is. So again, it's fun debunking these things, but it's not so much fun to know that there are so many people out there that believe these lies, and whether they're primed to believe it, whether there's underlying anti-Semitism, whether they want to pretend that they care about the underdog and that Israel is no longer the underdog, even though it's a tiny state in the middle of a gigantic Arab world and a gigantic Muslim world. For whatever reason it is, and it's a combination of all those reasons, but for whatever reason it is, the truth has to be hammered over and over again in order for people to finally understand, this is not at all the way the media is portraying it. It's not at all how groups like IfNotNow, whose aims in the end are not at all peaceful, it's not at all how they do it. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you very much. I did not see any questions for today, so thanks very much for the people that visited. It will be up on YouTube soon. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you guys. Have a good evening.